Okay, so today we're going to work out sheets 22, 23 and 24. So these sheets are going to be about angles. So the first sheet is going to be how to measure an angle and what type of angles there exist. On page 23, it's going to be very similar to page 22, and we are going to just measure angles. On page 24, we are going to draw angles. We're going to use the protractor to draw some of the angles, and we're going to use the t-square and set squares to draw the remaining angles. Okay? So page 24, it is very important that we stick the sheet to the table using our masking tape. Okay? If we do not stick this sheet to the table using masking tape, there's no point in using the t-square because every angle is going to be wrong. Okay? So make sure that you use masking tape when we need to. So let's start with page 22. So page 22, which is this one. Okay, so this is page 22. We're going to first have a look at what type of angles there exist. Okay, so the first type of angle is called an acute angle. The second type is a right angle. The third is an obtuse angle. Then we have a straight angle and a reflex angle. Okay? So an acute angle is any angle that is less than 90 degrees. Okay? So 90 degrees is this kind of angle. Okay? It's the corner of a square or a corner of a rectangle. So that is 90 degrees. Anything less than 90 degrees, we call that an acute angle. Okay? For example, this angle is less than 90 degrees. So we call it an acute angle. The next type of angle is a right angle. A right angle is an angle exactly of 90 degrees, like this one. Okay, so this angle is 90 degrees. So we call that a right angle. An obtuse angle is an angle that is more than 90 degrees. So an angle that is wider than this, for example, an angle like that. Okay, so an angle that is wider, we call that an obtuse angle. A straight line is simply a line that is straight, like the edge of a ruler. Okay, so that is 180 degrees. We call that a straight line. And then we have a reflex angle, which is this one over here. And it is an angle that is more than 180 degrees. Okay, so this angle is more than 180 degrees. So those are the type of angles. Now, how do we measure angles? So we use this type of tool that we call a protractor, and we use this to measure angles. So the way we do it is that first of all, we need to align this line over here. So this line over here has to be aligned to the line that we have. So let me make these lines a little bit darker so that you can see better. So the angle that we're going to measure is this. So the angle in between these two lines. Okay, so we have a line like this and a line like that. So in order to measure that angle, the first thing we need to do is make sure that this cross is exactly at the corner, like you see in this drawing. Okay, so the first thing they did was place that cross exactly at that corner. Then you have to align this horizontal line to one of these lines, either this one or that one. In this case, they chose to align it to this line. Okay, so the way it works is you place it like this, then move it around until everything is aligned. Then you start moving up until this line hits one of the marks that is on the protractor. In this case, it hits exactly the mark where you have 40 degrees. Now, why did I choose 40 degrees and not 140 degrees? There's a reason. So when you place the protractor on a line, let's use this one, you will see that this line hits two scales. We have a scale that starts from 0 here and ends at 180 degrees, and another scale that starts from 0 at the other side. Okay? So you're going to use the scale where the line hits the 0. In this case, it's the inside scale, even here. Okay, so the 0 mark is on the inside scale. That 0 mark hits this line, so we're going to use the inside scale, not the outside scale. Okay, so we start from 0, you move up until you hit the line, and then you can read the mark. In this case, it is 40 degrees. So all you have to do here is write 40 degrees. The symbol degrees is already there, so you don't need to write it down in this case. Here, we have another example we have another angle. This side, it points to the other direction. Now look what happens here. This time, instead of hitting the 0 scale on the inside, which happens to be on this side, 0, it hits the 0 on the outer scale. So we're going to use the outer scale for our measurement. Okay, so you start from 0, you move up until this line hits a point on the scale. In this case, it hits the point where it is 55 degrees. So all we have to do here is write 55 degrees. Okay, so this is the first part of the exercise. Now the second part, the part at the bottom, all you have to do is use the protractor. You align it with this cross exactly at the corner. Make sure that the horizontal line is perfectly aligned to the horizontal line on this angle. Okay, so by doing this. Now, you can notice that the inside scale has 0 on this side, which hits this line. So that is the scale we're going to use. The outside scale has 0 on the other side, and this doesn't hit the line. So we cannot use the outside scale. We're only going to use the inside scale. I have to align it again because I moved it by accident. Okay, so we can start going up until we hit the line. And we can see that the line hits at 35 degrees. So in this case, the angle is 35 degrees. What type of angle is it? It is an acute angle. Okay, so we're going to write in capital letters, as we always do in graphical communication. So it is an acute angle. Try to keep the height the same for the letters. The next one, you can measure that. You're going to do it yourselves. The third one, again, you can measure this angle. The fourth one, I'm going to explain something because it is a reflex angle. And there are two ways of measuring a reflex angle. So the first way of measuring it is by adding this angle. Let's call this angle A, and this angle, which is B. So if I add A plus B, we're going to get our answer. But what angle is A? I can see that this is a straight line. Okay, so the angle from here till here, that is exactly 180 degrees. So all I need to do in this case is measure the angle B, and then I add it to 180 degrees. And that gives me my answer. So how do we measure angle B? It's by taking the protractor, turn it upside down this time, place the cross exactly on that point. We're going to measure this angle, so we have to use the 0 that hits this line, which is on the inside scale. So you start from 0, you move that way, it's 55. So 55 plus 180 degrees, that gives you your answer. Another way of working this out is by adding this angle. So we have this angle, let's call it C. Okay, so if I do this, I take 360 degrees, which is a full circle, and I deduct this part from it, and I subtract C from it. That's going to give me my answer. Okay, it's going to give me the same answer I got here. So all you have to do, take the protractor, align it in place. Now we're going to measure this angle, and this 0, the 0 on the outside, hits the line. So we're going to start from 0, we're going to move on the outside scale, and we're going to see that it's 125 degrees. So if we take 360 minus 125 degrees, that's going to give me my answer. We write the answer here, and then we write the type of angle, which I already said is a reflex angle. So let's move on to page 23. So page 23, we have a similar exercise like we had in the previous page. The only difference is that instead of writing the answer next to the angle, we have an area over here where we're going to write the answers. So let's find angle A, which is this one. We can measure that angle by taking the protractor, align it with the corner, with the cross exactly at the corner, and the horizontal line aligned to the line on the protractor, and we start measuring the angle. If you find that it's helpful to extend the lines, you can do that. Okay, so if I extend these lines, I can better see which scale I'm going to hit. Okay, so I'm going to use the scale on the inside because this line hits the 0 mark on the inside. I'm going to go up and I'm going to see that it hits the 90-degree mark. So in this position here, I'm going to write 90 in this space, and I'm going to write the type of angle. In this case, the type of angle is a right angle because it is 90 degrees. So what I have to do, using capital letters, I'm going to write right, and instead of writing the word angle all the time, I can draw the symbol. So that symbol, that is another way of saying angle, okay, without writing the whole word. So what I have to do on this page is I go over each letter, I measure these angles, every single angle, I write the angle over here and the type of angle over there. So that is page 23. Let's move on to page 24. So now page 24, it is a little bit more complicated. As you can see, some angles here are very familiar. So we have a 45-degree angle, a 30-degree angle, a 60-degree angle, and then we have a 75-degree angle. If we look at the question, it says that we need to use the set squares. Okay? To use the set squares, you have to use the t-square. We can't use the set square on their own. We have to rest it on something, and we rest them on the t-square. But there's no point in using the t-square if I don't stick this sheet to the table. So I need to make sure that this sheet is perfectly aligned and it's stuck firmly to the table. Otherwise, there's no point in using this t-square if this is moving around. Okay, it's still not going to give me the right angle. So how are we going to stick the sheet to the table? Is by using pieces of tape. So the first step is to take 4 pieces of tape. You can prepare them beforehand and stick them somewhere at the edge of the board. So I have these 4 pieces of tape. Of course, use masking tape, otherwise you might risk tearing the paper. So here we have our masking tape. The next thing we need to do is we need to find a line that is drawn on our sheet. Make sure that the t-square is perfectly straight at the edge, not like this or like this, but it has to be perfectly straight, okay? And then we're going to move this sheet around until I see that one of these lines, either this one or that line or any of these lines, is exactly aligned to the t-square. Once I get that, I can hold everything in place. I take a piece of tape and stick it like this at the corner. I take another piece, stick it at the other corner. Now, it's held by two pieces of tape, so it's not going to go anywhere. So I can remove this t-square and stick the remaining 2 pieces of tape at the bottom corners. Okay? Now, the next step, I'm going to use the set squares to draw these angles. So this set square, we have, let me write on top of it, so we have an angle of 90 degrees. It's not showing very well. Let's see this one. So we have 90 degrees, we have 45 degrees and another angle of 45 degrees. We need to draw an angle of 45 degrees there and an angle of 45 degrees there. So we're going to use these 2 angles. So, making sure that the t-square is straight. How can I make sure that it is straight? By always pulling a little bit in that direction. So if it's like this and I pull a little bit in this direction, it's going to straighten itself. Then I rest the protractor on top, and then using a pencil. Okay, I'm using these markers so that you can see better. We're going to draw a line from that corner. So this is a 45-degree line. The other side, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do that as well. Okay, so those are two angles of 45 degrees. The next one, 60 degrees. Now this angle, 30 degrees, sorry. This angle doesn't have an angle of 60 degrees. So this is the angle, this is the set square that we are going to use. On this side, we have an angle of 30 degrees. This side we have an angle of 60 degrees. And here we have an angle of 90 degrees. So if we use this angle, we can draw this line over here. Okay, so that is an angle of 30 degrees. Now to draw the other line, what I need to do is I need to rotate the set square in such a way that I get the angle of 30 on the other side. And now I can draw this line as well. So that gives me another angle of 30 degrees. What about 60 degrees? So I'm going to turn this around until I get my 60 degrees on that side, where I need it to be. I hit the corner and I draw the line. I turn it again to get 60 degrees on this side, so that I can draw that line. Okay? Now what about 75? So if you look at this set square, we don't have 75 degrees on it. If we look at this one, we don't have 75 degrees either. But if I add 45 degrees to 30 degrees, that gives me 75. Okay? So how can we do that? So let's start from this one. If we place our set square like this, we can use 30 degrees, we can place the 45 degree set square on top of it, and 30 degrees plus 45 degrees, that gives me my 75. Here you need to make sure that everything is straight. I don't want to have the set square like this, or like this, or the t-square like that. Okay? Everything has to be flat on top of each other. And then we just draw that line. So what if I want to do the other side? I just rotate this. So I have 30 degrees plus 45, which gives me my 75 degree line. Okay? So the first part is ready. It's done using the t-square and the set squares. Of course, you have to stick the sheets to the table. If you don't, the answer is going to be wrong. Now, the second part. The second part, the numbers that we have are all different and they are not standard numbers. They are not numbers that we can find on our set squares. So we cannot use our set squares. What we have to do is that we need to use our protractor. Okay? So let's start with the first one. It's 25 degrees. So I don't need the t-square now. I take the protractor, I make sure that this cross hits exactly this corner. I need to also make sure that this horizontal line is perfectly aligned to the drawn line. I see which scale hits the line at the 0 point, and in this case it's the inner scale, not the outer scale. So 0 is here. And I start moving up until I hit the 25 degree mark, which is over here. And all I do is just put a small dot. Okay, I just put a small dot 25 degrees away from that line. Now I can remove the protractor, and using a ruler I can connect this point to that point. And that gives me my 25 degree line. So let's do this one, and the rest you're going to do them on your own. So this one, I place this cross exactly at the corner where we need the line to be. So I place the cross over there. I see which scale hits the 0 mark. In this case, it's the outer scale. I have to realign it again. Okay, in this case, it's the outer scale that hits this line at that 0 mark. I'm going to start moving up until I hit 42, because the angle we need to draw is an angle of 42 degrees. And we make a small mark over there. Then I remove the protractor, and either using the ruler or even the flat part on the protractor, I can connect those 2 points. and that gives me an angle of 42 degrees. Okay, so this is how you're going to work these out. So this, page 22, 23 and 24, you need to have them ready by next week, and I want to see photos of the worked out sheets. Okay, I'm going to give you marks based on what I see to the pictures that you send me, and that's going to determine the final mark that you're going to have this year. Okay, see you next week.